As you're running these experiments each week, we want you to be as successful as possible, and we know that you want that too. What we also know is that this doesn't come easy for every person or every team, that you might be nervous, that you might be experiencing hesitation from your team, even the people around you. They may have objections about these experiments. And so this week, we don't want you to feel unconfident. We don't want you to feel like an imposter. We want to make sure that you succeed with these experiments. And so this week's experiment is actually about how to prepare for the experiments that we're releasing each week. I'm Derek from the sodium halogen team, and what we have found is that experiments are actually the perfect way to build momentum and add unity to your team and company culture. Change is always a little uncomfortable. Even good change that we know is good for us is uncomfortable for people. But what we can do is set up the experiment so that people buy into it even easier. And so for this week's experiment, there are 3 things we want you to do to prepare when you're pitching an experiment. Number 1, I want you to cast a vision. And so what that looks like is when you're pitching this, you need to have 2 things in mind. 1, what problem we are solving or what challenge we are tackling. And so by knowing that, by doing that, you help your team understand the purpose of this. And 2, I want to make sure that you know what's at stake here. And so what's the really good thing that could come from this, or what potential bad thing are we avoiding by running this experiment? And in doing so, you cast a vision that your team can get behind. And then 2, we want you to overcome objections. You may already know or be able to anticipate some objections, some hang-ups that your team may have. And so when you get ready to pitch, just know that, be aware of that, be prepared to answer and overcome those objections. And so if you can anticipate that your team member is going to come back, well, we've tried this before, just be ready to give an answer for that when you pitch this experiment. And then number 3, and lastly, give them a script. This is hugely important. You need to show your team what the promised land looks like. You need to give them a script. Let them know what a win looks like, what success looks like for them. And so it's the equivalent of saying action, but not having any direction. So just make sure that you let your team know what's required of them, that we need you to spend 10 minutes today thinking creatively and working on this project. They'll be much more apt and quick to get behind you when they actually know what's required of them. For this week's experiment, add these steps to your preparation. Cast vision by describing the problem that you're tackling, and then also anticipate and overcome any objections, and then lastly, give them a script that lets your team know what is required of them. You'll be able to measure this by a couple of different factors. 1, you'll feel more confident when you're pitching, and 2, your team will have less hesitations and buy in a lot quicker.